Alright guys, welcome to my updated Warrior build guide for the Heart of Thorns release. Before I get into it, I want to specifically address that this guide is not a build guide for raids. Raids are completely different from Dungeons and Fractals and the sort of challenge they present, and this guide is not meant to offer any insight into how you should build your warrior for raiding. If and when a stable raid meta is established, I will definitely 100% you can count on it revisit the subject, but for now, please let this build guide serve as an example of what I think you should be running on your warrior in dungeons and the new high-level fractals. Before I get into it, I want to talk about the two builds that we will be discussing today and the variations of each. The first is the Failing Strength Warrior. This build is meant to be the primary might stacker for your team. It utilizes a pure greatsword rotation in order to maximize personal DPS as well as might generation. The main drawback of this build is the lack of fast hands. However, we are all, by now, used to this rotation, and it shouldn't be a big problem. The second build is a solo warrior build, which is designed, as you might guess, for solo play, as well as times when you are in a group which already has another warrior who happens to be using Failing Strength. It often, but not always, utilizes Discipline in order to enable a fast hands-based DPS rotation, which is ideal for difficult bosses. Additionally, it has some pretty interesting unique team utility with regeneration granted by your banners. So with that said, let's get right into it. Alright guys, gear is a tricky subject now. As I will discuss when I talk about traits, there is a split between builds that use arms and those that use Berserker. If you primarily use arms, your optimal gear by far is full Berserker, as you can easily achieve 100% crit chance thanks to Signet Mastery. If you use Berserker instead, the optimal gear loadout is full Assassin's weapons and armor. However, it is not realistic for players to carry two Ascended sets of armor and weapons. Therefore, my recommendation is to use two Assassin's earrings and equip those when running a Berserker spec, and have two backup Berserker stat earrings when running an arms-based spec. Along the same lines, for builds utilizing arms, I recommend that you use Mighty Infusions, and for builds utilizing Berserker, I recommend Precise Infusions. For all builds, I recommend Strength Runes as your standard gearing. As you can see, armor is Berserker, runes of strength, and versatile precise infusions. As far as weapons, we are going to go with a greatsword, and on our swap set, in between fights for running through the world, we'll use sword and warhorn. At times when we're in combat, we'll use mace or axe and mace. So the main stats are going to be air and force on both sets. These are your go-to weapon stats for daytime instances, which is most fractals and about half the dungeons. You can, if you're a min-maxer, carry around a night weapon. I have a backup greatsword with Sigil of the Night and Sigil of Force that I switch to when I'm in a dungeon that is nighttime, or a fractal that's nighttime. You can have a backup axe with Sigil of the Night, and I recommend, for times where you have to range a boss, that you do keep a longbow with force and strength. Why strength? When you have to range a boss, your might production for your team will go down, since your failing strength isn't proccing very often. However, with a strength sigil, you'll at least be able to do something there. And of course, your underwater weapon should be a spear with whatever sigils you feel like putting on it. Additionally, if you're a real min-maxer, I recommend your sword have an energy sigil on it, and your warhorn have a sigil of debility. Why debility? Weakness, duration 20%. One of the advantages of the warhorn is the weakness from Call to Arms, which is a 7-second debuff to enemy trash mobs, which is going to vastly lower the DPS of the trash mobs you encounter. So that is it for gear, guys. The main difference that you want to take away from this is I'm recommending two Assassin's Earrings. If you can't get Assassin's Earrings because you haven't finished the Dungeoneer for a Ra or CM, you can use Assassin's Weapons instead, or 3 pieces of assassin's armor, head, chest, and legs, and you'll arrive in basically the exact same place. Any of those 3 methods work. Doesn't really matter which one you use, but I do recommend you take advantage of one of them. Alright guys, so for traits for the Phalanx Warrior, we're going to go with Strength, Tactics, Berserker. In Strength, we're going to take Restorative Strength, Forceful Greatsword, and Berserker's Power. This much hasn't changed from the previous meta. In Tactics, it'll still be Empowered, Empowered Allies, and Phalanx Strength. Again, these traits haven't changed. The new hotness, however, is Berserker. In Berserker, we are going to take Smash Brawler, Blood Reaction, and Eternal Champion. These are... The Blood Reaction and Smash Brawler are very, very big DPS boosts. Eternal Champion, at first, when I was first playing, I thought it was just a throwaway. It wasn't a very good trait. However, after playing a lot of Heart of Thorns open world and Fractals, where the bosses have, and the mobs you encounter have a lot of CC, the ability to ignore their CC by having perma-stability cannot be underestimated. At very worst, it amounts to an extra 1% damage in conjunction with Empowered, by knowing that you'll always have that extra boon up. Alright, so if you don't want to run Berserker, or for whatever reason Berserker won't work, what you can do is you can switch Berserker to Arms, and take Signet Mastery, Deep Strike, and Furious. This will result in the old meta build. It is a DPS loss to run this build, however, it is still completely serviceable, and works out pretty well. There are a couple upsides to this build. It does generate a bit of extra vulnerability from Rending Strikes, and it is a bit easier when you're not in Berserk mode to maintain your Berserker's power uptime with Furious. So, in a less organized Pug group, and one other thing that's key with the Arms build, and why I would recommend it in a less organized Pug group, is your Arcing Slice, when you're not in Berserker, gives you Fury. When you are in Berserker, your Arcing Slice in Berserk, your Primal Arcing Slice, I think it's called Arc Divider, doesn't give you Fury. In an organized group, you're going to get Fury from either the Ellie or the Revenant in your group. However, in a disorganized Pug, that might not be the case, and you might be better off running Arms so that you can have access to the Fury from Arcing Slice. So that is the different variants for the Phalanx Strength Warrior build, and real quickly, I will talk about the solo build. Okay, so if you're running around the open world solo, or you're soloing a dungeon boss, or you are the second warrior in your group, I highly recommend using this build, since you don't need 2 warriors with Phalanx Strength. It would be Strength, Arms, Berserker. This is the highest DPS build that a warrior has access to. This is a pure greatsword build, and it will be able to stack Adrenaline, especially in Berserk form, thanks to Furious and Smash Brawler, insanely fast, and you will be able to spam your Arc Divider on cooldown, and your DPS will go through the roof. It is a really, really powerful build if you are the second warrior in your group, or you're just roaming around the open world. There are times, however, for a very difficult boss fight where you just need fast hands, feel free to swap Berserker to Discipline and use Warrior Sprint, Inspiring Battle Standard, and Heightened Focus. This combination will work out best for you in situations like that. So that is it for traits. Berserker really doing really good work and making super high DPS with Smash Brawler and Blood Reaction. So I hope you guys really do get a chance to check that out as soon as you can. Moving on to consumables. Alright guys, so consumables real quick. Depending on the build variant you're using, different food is preferred. If you're using the warrior in a group as the primary might stacker, your best choices are golden fried dumplings. Additionally, if your group has someone else who's helping contribute to might a little bit, like a decent Ellie or a Revenant, you can cut back on the golden fried dumplings and go with truffle steaks for higher DPS. If you're using a build with arms, you will get to 100% crit chance from your Signet Mastery. In that case, you don't need the precision from Truffle Steak, and the optimal food choice is sweetened, spicy butternut squash soup. Again, I love to remind you guys, and I remind you in every video, that you should use at least some food. If you cannot afford this best-in-slot food, my recommendation is to get something like plates of steak or asparagus, or an even cheaper version, and use something. Using some food, even cheap, super dirt cheap food, is better than using no food whatsoever. Additionally, I always recommend people carry with them the full set of slaying potions so they can have the optimal DPS boost versus any target. For situations where you cannot use a slaying potion because such a thing doesn't exist for the mobs you're fighting, the best in-slot item for the warrior is the Bountiful Sharpening Stone, which gives you 10% boon duration, which is really good with your failing strength, as you might guess, or even just your might stacking being selfish, and 100 power, and will never turn away any extra power. So that is it for the consumables. Let's talk DPS rotation. Alright, DPS rotation. In this section, I want to discuss the optimal DPS rotation for a warrior. The goal of a greatsword rotation is to maximize your berserker's power uptime as well as your stick and move uptime. This is accomplished by making sure you always use Arcing Slice or Arc Divider on cooldown as long as you have maximum adrenaline, and by dodging back to the boss after every use of Whirlwind attack. Lastly, you want to prioritize 100 Blades, Whirlwind attack, and Blade Trail, assuming you can get 2 hits, and Rush over an auto attack whenever possible. Berserker makes it even more complicated. You will lead with a double dodge into your elite skill Headbutt, which is a key part of the Berserker build as it gives you 30 adrenaline, in order to fill your adrenaline. You'll activate Berserk mode. You will use your Axe Burst skill for Decapitate, followed by your Vuln stacking skills. Swap to your Greatsword set. Use 100 Blades, Whirlwind attack, Blade Trail, dodge back to the boss, and Rush. And you'll continue to do that until your Berserk mode is just about to expire. You'll Arc Divider to re-up your Berserker's power, and then your Berserk mode will end. You're going to continue to do your high priority DPS rotation of 100 Blades, Whirlwind attack, Blade Trail, and Rush until Berserk mode is off cooldown. If Berserk mode comes off cooldown and you don't have full adrenaline, you will be able to use Headbutt again to give you full adrenaline, as well as doing a very high damaging attack, and immediately go back into Berserk mode and do an Arc Divider. If you have full adrenaline, feel free to blast a normal Arcing Slice, followed by Headbutt, back into Berserk, followed by an Arc Divider, so you get 2 heavy hitting attacks back to back. Really important in organized groups to make sure you get good use out of Headbutt. Using Headbutt will mean you don't have to activate your Signet of Fury. And in an organized group, you shouldn't need the Signet of Rage for any buffs, as you should be getting Swiftness and Fury and plenty of Might from the entire party. So Headbutt is just a straight DPS boost and the best way to speedily get into Berserk mode without hurting your DPS. So with that said, I'm going to show you a DPS rotation in action that is close to perfect, good enough for the purposes of an everyday player, and it should be what you strive to go. Alright guys, so let's quickly talk slot skills. Healing Signet, of course, our best heal. Everyone is very used to playing with Healing Signet on their bar now, and it needs no explanation to the warrior community. Just remember, it is super powerful in an arms variant because you can activate it when outside of combat to keep your critical chance super high. In a Berserker build, you can't really do that, but you can just enjoy one of the best healing skills in the game. For the remainder of our slot skills, we're going to take Signet of Fury, Banner of Strength, Banner of Discipline, and our elite in a Berserker build should be Headbutt. Signet of Fury, straight DPS boost. One thing to keep in mind, if you do have a Ranger in your party and he is using Spotter, which he should be, you can switch Signet of Fury out for Signet of Might for an additional DPS boost. Your banners should almost never leave your bar. There's almost never a reason to leave your banners at home. If you do need to swap out a skill for some additional utility, let's say you're doing some particular event where you know you need Signet of Stamina, you swap out Signet of Fury. That should be your first thing to go. Banners should never leave your bar. Lastly, I want to discuss weapon skills that have niche uses outside of the normal DPS rotation. Obviously, anytime you are outside of combat and running to the next encounter, you should always swap your Axe Mace out for your sword and Warhorn. The sword has a leap, Warhorn has swiftness for your party. These two things are very useful. One thing to keep in mind is that the sword leap is a leap finisher, meaning if a thief or NG drops a smoke field to blast stealth after you've used your blast finishers, you can leap through it to get an extra 3 seconds of stealth for yourself and push yourself forward to the next encounter. Additionally, it is important to utilize the longbow for the number 3 skill Arcing Arrow as a blast finisher when your group is stacking stealth or might or anything like that before combat. The other interesting thing to consider is there are particular encounters where you might want to go with double mace. Mainhand mace has a CC on the number 3 skill and on the burst skill, and if you have offhand mace, it has a CC on the number 5 skill. If in the future, especially in the current situation where we have bosses that have break bars and breaking the break bar is of the utmost importance, having access to 3 easily cast CCs can be a matter of life or death for your party. So do keep in mind that Mace is a perfectly viable set on swap when heavy CC is required. Lastly, I want to touch on Tremor, especially. Tremor I use as part of a DPS rotation in my example. However, you should be aware of how good it is at CC. Since it is so good at CC, you might want to just keep in mind the encounter that you're in and realize that there's a good chance you should be saving this to break a break bar at a key moment. If you know the fight you're in is going to require you to CC at a key moment, don't waste your Tremor on DPS. Hold it back for that critical moment where the CC is super relevant. So that is it for the skills that you can be using in your bar. Alright, so that is it, guys. I hope you really enjoyed my updated warrior build guide. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask them in the comments. I will do my best to answer them. I hope you guys really like the Berserker. I know a lot of people in the community, especially the warrior community, were down on the Berserker and not hyped for it and didn't think it was going to be good. It's good, guys. Once you've had a chance to play it, you will like it. The rotation is more complicated, faster paced, and more rewarding when you master it than the old build. So it's more interesting, better, higher skill cap, and overall and better output. You can't argue with that. I hope you guys give it a chance, and I hope you enjoyed this guide.